authorities over there were spending close to $30 billion in the new fiscal year that starts in about 2 weeks' time. Now, that figure is nearly $100 million more than the current budget. The Finance Secretary, Henry Rotich, presented the 2019-2020 budget proposals in Parliament with new tax measures that aim to collect about $364 extra million for the exchequer. Mr. Rotich, for example, recommended that betting firms are taxed 10% on all amounts staked. As expected, he also did increase in taxes on cigarettes and alcohol by about 15%. The education sector has received a large share of spending in the 2019-2020 budget after being allocated a total of about $206 million. The Treasury Cabinet Secretary also allocated about $545 million to free-day secondary education, another $132 million set aside for the free primary education program. He also announced some relatively tough compliance measures that he says are designed to catch defaulters using technology. Right then, so what should we make of the tax measures designed to support Kenya's billion-dollar budget? Let's find out. Ryan Kingeta is a partner at Anderson Tax here in Kenya. He joins me now live in studio. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
So, initial impressions, what did you think?
Looks good on paper. We are looking to encourage local manufacturing or basically keep away competition from external other countries, basically. So it looks good on paper. My concern is how do we actually ensure that these measures are implemented and we achieve the intended benefits.
And of course, there's also the question of there's maybe another shoe left to drop, because towards the end of his speech, he said, I'm going to be tabling the income tax bill that's going to be coming in whatever period of time. And the last draft that we saw of that had some pretty concerning provisions, an extra tax rate of 35% on corporate income tax, above 500 million shillings, I believe, and $7,000 a month on the personal income side. If that comes back to the floor of the House, it will be a huge negative for the economy, won't it?
It will. It will. Our CS, our government, is basically between a rock and a hard place. They need to collect as much as possible in form of tax revenue. And I'm sure that's why they're going for these increased tax rates and so on and so forth. Whether the income tax bill will actually see the day of light is a different story. My belief is that with these high tax rates, all the CS is trying to do is to collect as much as possible. Whether his colleagues on the floor will side with him, we cannot tell. We can only wait and see.
Right. There was something else he tried to do there, because we always tend to criticize the government for trying to tax a very narrow part of the economy. But as far as withholding tax is concerned, he did something interesting. So he dropped the rate from 6% down to 2%. But he also tried to apply to a much broader range of services, everything from catering to cleaning and fumigation services and so on and so forth. What's your assessment of that?
The drop of 6% to 2% is specifically withholding VAT, where the government has appointed a few agents, mostly government agencies, who withhold an element of the VAT that you charge them.
Yeah.
So that has come down from 6% to 2%, which I think is a brilliant thing, because it then reduces the amount of VAT refunds that we have been seeking from the government. In terms of the spreading the base with the withholding tax, I think it's a good thing for the government, because what then they're trying to do is to bring as many people as possible into the tax net. But it's not a good thing for you who's the service provider, because what you'll find is that normally 5% of the gross number is bigger than 30% of your net profit.
Yeah.
So what you end up doing is you set up most of these service providers to be in a refundable position. So you end up taking more tax from them than is due actually from them. So they end up in
he's compounding that refund problem, isn't he?
Because that's more or less what will happen, because the margins are normally very small.
Yeah.
So if you take 5% of the top number, it's normally much higher than when you compare with 30% of the lower number.
He spent, I believe it was almost 15 minutes in his speech talking about the fact that suppliers have been complaining, we're not being paid by government. So that's one element of the amount of debt that he's got to pay off. But the tax refund problem was something he kept going back to over and over again. And yet, later on in the speech, he comes to tax proposals and it seems he's compounding it. I mean, that seemed to be a recurring pattern in this budget.
Sometimes I think we come up with measures and we just don't look through and see what are the eventual repercussions. So probably that's a pitfall that we have with our budget. But what I do like is the commitment, which is apparent, that they indeed intend to pay the contractors as much as possible, close that up by the end of June, and then hopefully we start a new cycle come 2019, 2020 financial year.
Right, and of course, just for reference for our viewers, the fiscal year on this side of the world starts from the 1st of July up to the end of June. Food, because part of this whole big four thing, it's affordable housing, it's affordable healthcare, there's boosting manufacturing, but food is also a pretty big element of that. But this budget didn't really do much in terms of making it easier for people to actually produce food, to process food, and so on and so forth. And agriculture is huge. Bulk of GDP, biggest single employer in this country. That's a massive missed opportunity, isn't it?
It is. I'll fully agree with you on that one. He spent quite a lot of time telling us about his budget allocation in relation to the big four. If you look at the tax measures that came in through the budget, what you'll notice is that most of them are geared towards the manufacturing side of things.
Yeah.
He said nothing with regard to agriculture. If you ask me, the only thing that touched on agriculture is telling us not to export as much as possible tanned hides and skins. So you're telling us not to export tanned hides and skins, but then what do we do with them in country? You increase the export levy on that, but you don't tell us what we do with the tanned skins and hides if we don't export them. So those are the kind of pitfalls that we, like I said earlier, we just don't see through and see the repercussions of what the tax measures that we.
And also he also raised the railway development levy, which was essentially ring-fenced, or at least the initial intent was to ring-fence it so that it pays off for the debt that we incurred in building the SGR. But in raising it to 2%, I mean, it's, you know, left hand gives, right hand takes. On one hand, I tell you, I'm going to give you a 30% rebate as a manufacturer on your power costs, which still hasn't come into effect. And on the other hand, I tell you, well, I'm going to raise your railway development levy, so your logistics costs go up. If you're in building and construction, your inputs go up. If you're in manufacturing and you're importing, you know, simple things like cabling, again, you get hit. On balance, this contradictions will do more harm than good.
The RDL, the Railway Development Levy, the beauty about that, at least if I had him correct, is that it's only the increase is focused on finished goods. So we are really not going, the intention is not to touch raw materials or intermediate goods. But yes, there's a lot of give and take, and you wonder where exactly are we heading with this? You increase the RDL, and then you tell me that you're reducing what is this? The IDF, the import declaration fees.
Yes.
So you ask yourself, what exactly are we trying to achieve? Again, another opportunity to say, are we going to do more harm than good? Probably. All I say about the budget is that we just need we need enablers. There's a lot of tax measures coming through, but we don't have the enablers to see through what exactly the intended benefits are. So you'll do one thing, but it doesn't achieve the intended benefit because the enabling provisions are not actually put in to achieve what it is that we intend to achieve.
Oh, okay. We've got a few weeks to actually have this debated, so we'll see how this works out.
That's
right.
correct.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.